Yesterday, I was just minding my own business. I was answering some questions in the Discord. I was working on the next champion guide, and I came across this peculiar image. The skill caps tier list. I was glancing over the tier list, and suddenly it hit me. That's right. Zed is B tier. I've been banning Zed for a few weeks now. Am I washed? Am I bad at the game? So naturally, I started to investigate. I hit up AJ, another coach from the MLA, to confirm if I am indeed washed or if I'm being gaslit. Well, the conclusions of that question will stay classified, but what I do got for you is the MLA approved tier list AJ and me made ourselves. This is NA and EU combining forces to create the ultimate high elo tier list for patch 2506. So this is the result of a 2-hour long sweaty discussion with AJ. Unfortunately, he's not here for the recording of the video, but we'll definitely get him on for the next one. We're going to start off with S tier. There is 3 champs that are absolutely better than all of the other champs currently in the meta. That's Syndra, Taliyah, and Ahri. Why are these champs so good? Well, you can basically blind pick these champs every single game and you will be useful. They have decent early lane. They can survive, they have incredible mid game, really good scaling, and also whatever team composition that you play them in or whatever team composition you play against, you will always be able to do your job. There's only a very small amount of team compositions that are incredibly tough to play against. So these champs, as strong blind picks, decent laners, good impact on the map, are clearly S tier and definitely the strongest of the patch. So the next tier is A, and the way that I'm going to approach it, you see a lot of these drawings on the screen right here. We're going to just start with the general understanding of the A tier, and then we're going to go towards individual champions and why they're marked with a specific color. So generally, A tier is also champs that are just incredibly good in the meta right now. If you play one of these champs, you are able to get top 10 challenger as long as you're good enough on these champions. There's a small caveat to these. These champs generally have one small downside in the sense that sometimes their matchups, for example, like Galio, aren't the best, and therefore blind picking them or picking them in certain team composition can feel quite tricky. Or the mechanical execution and the ceiling of it is so high that it's just so hard to put them in S tier because you have to play perfectly to put them into the highest tier, so to say. That being said, right, we see a lot of skirmishers, strong skirmishers currently being around. It's a very skirmish-oriented meta, hence why the Taliyah, the Ahri, the Galio, in this case also the Yone, the Sylas, that's why they're so high up there. Akshan as well. A lot of fighting, and if you're good at fighting, and if you're good at either creating priorities so you can be early on these fights, hence why also Victor is here, that's when you have the most impact on the game, and that's why these champions are in this particular position here in A tier. There's a few ones that we want to be lining out. The first one is Orianna. I think that this is a champion that is so incredibly hard. Like, if you are really, really, really good on Orianna, if you're the top 10 Oriannas on the server, you'll probably be able to put Orianna in S tier right here because they make that champion look like a different beast, having the priorities, having the control. But if you're not one of those guys, more likely than not, she's up all the way in C tier right here because of the fact that you are gonna massively struggle from behind. You need to play the perfect game, otherwise it's very easy to just be useless. Another pick that we have to mention is Ambessa. I think that Ambessa is potentially borderline broken. I had it together with AJ. He's mainly the one that's pushing on the Ambessa train. He's been seeing it a little bit in NA Challenger. There's a very, very, very high elo, Toasty Alex, I think, high elo Ambessa player that's destroying people in lane and taking their LP like it's nothing. And yeah, if you're really good at this champion, it's probably an S tier broken champion, but potentially hit an OP. But this champ is so hard as well that if you are just not that good on the champ, we can just put her right back into C tier right here. Anivia is a little bit different. Anivia is a champion that has insane win rates, but the pick rate's actually really low. If you go to Lolalytics, the amount of games that this champion wins, also comparatively to the same rank, is absolutely crazy. So for Anivia, right, I also understand why that's the case. She has the push, she has the picking tools, which is really good in solo queue with her W and with her Q, of course. So I understand that Anivia is a very strong champ. We have 2 very high elo Anivia OTPs in EU. We got Froggen, who's back on the grind again, and Berkan, who's also absolutely nailing people in this champion. So I think it's a little bit of a sleeper champion. I think if more people will pick it, they'll probably find success with the champ. But I understand because the champ isn't always the most fun to play. Besides that, if you pick a champ that's in A tier and you get good on it, you will get results with it. We're moving on to B tier. And B tier consists of champions that are average, that can just do their job most of the time in the games, but they have a small caveat to it. If you look at, for example, the first 3 champions, the LeBlanc, the Aurora, Zoe, very similar champs in the way they play out the game. They have very strong laning phases. They have really good early skirmishing. The only problem with these champions is if you ever fall behind or you make one mistake too many, you will be useless. So these champs are actually really good if you're very good on these champs and don't really make a lot of mistakes. But otherwise, you're not really going to find consistent success with them because these champs are very, very hard to execute in the mid to late game, especially from behind. Akali is not at the strongest position right now. And you also take a look at Jace and Azir. These are complete average B tier champions. They're just average. If you're good on them, you can make them work. But you won't be able to find success in all games. You won't be able to find success in all team compositions. And you definitely have to have the hands to back it up. Let's take a look at the Tristana and the Smolder, because these are quite interesting pickups. Smolder's got a pretty big buff this patch, especially when it comes to his wave clear and to his actual hit damage of the W, which massively helps in favoring himself in the decent matchups, because most decent matchups are shorter range, not control mages. So if you're going to be picking up Smolder into shorter range matchup right now, with the E and the W buff, you're actually going to be in a position where you might potentially just nuke the matchup and get into free scaling mode on this champ. I think Tristana is very, very similar. Tristana is very similar to Corki. We all know that Corki is just this decent average mid lane champ. That's a very strong lane. Very similar as to actually LeBlanc, Orianna, Aurora, but then the AD variant of it. Tristana is a champion that if you pick this champ in the right matchups, in the right game states, she is probably hidden OP and in an insane spot. But she also has the downside that if you fall behind on this champ or you are picking this in the bad states, she's going to be very, very bad. And I think Smolder is somewhat very similar. If you manage to pick these champs in the right positions, you can have your hand on a very, very, very OP champion. But if you pick them in the worst spots, so if you're going to be playing against Syndra as Smolder, hey, good luck, man. Good luck in that lane, actually. Have fun in that one. You're going to go down 40 CS and die twice. So that's like the main premise of the B tier, average. So moving on to the C tier. The C tier champions struggle a little bit. And why do they struggle in solo queue? Well, because of the fact that some of the numbers are just quite low, or they're very unique in the way they approach the game. Mainly look at these control mages right here. Way's definitely gotten hit over the last few patches ago, and that put him definitely a lot weaker. I've been playing a lot of Way for my for updating the Way guide on the MLA, and this champ just lacks damage is the feeling I get. It just lacks damage. As unfortunate as it is, it's a really fun champ, but not really consistent enough to climb within solo queue at the moment, I believe. And we also got some other trends of champs right here. These are the counter pick oriented champions, where there's just no way that you can blind these champs or early pick these champs, because you're going to get counterpicked. If you get counterpicked, your effectiveness of your champ heavily goes down. But if you find yourself in a position where you do put yourself in a good position in draft, and you actually have a very good team comp to supply you as well, you are going to be a monster. So then you could absolutely be able to put these champs into A tier. But the reality is we cannot put them there because of the fact that they're counter pick oriented. And a lot of people would, for example, put Aurelia in D tier or something like that. But no, Aurelia is good if you pick her in the right spot. But getting that right spot for Aurelia is just really, really hard. And therefore, she's just not that common. We also have supporters, champs right on the bottom here. These champs are good if you can find yourself, like right here, a lane matchup that doesn't expose you. If you don't get exposed in lane, these champs can get very, very brutal to beat. So usually in lower elos, especially like the Malzahar, the Veigar are going to be a little bit better. But in the higher elos, usually we don't see the fact of the fact that you don't just get abused in lane. A lot of strong laners in higher elos, so these champs just don't really add up to par unless you know that every specific of the matchups, like Starzal on Veigar, in which that he can just bypass matchups and skill up anyway. So the D tier, the D stands for dog shit, because these champs you don't want to have in your team. Why is that the case? Well, a lot of these champions heavily struggle in the current meta or just don't function if someone buys the Mercury threats. Vex, Annie, other champs that struggle with landing skill shots and struggle with tanky champions. It's just very, very brutal to play these champions in the current meta. And I know that some people may have Vex as their favorite champion, but if you're high elo and you're playing Vex and someone's buying Mercs or an MR item, at level 7 you get outskilled and you're not going to be doing anything anymore. Even you see, for example, in pro play that this Murring guy picked Vex into Ambessa, right? And yes, you'll win the first 7 levels, but once Ambessa's got a bit of MR, she's just going to out-sustain you. She's just going to just beat you even in the side lane. There's just no way that this is a matchup that like skills well for you, even though in the early lane you have yourself a good spot. So even though that Vex is usually the counter pick oriented champ, you don't even get into good positions if you have your counter pick into the right champs. That's why these champs are in the D tier. Now there's one notable mention, which is Lucian. Lucian is a champion that if you are incredibly good at laning and very, very, very good at the game, I think Lucian can be put into A tier. But the reality is, there's only like probably 2 or 3 people on a server that can pull it off. I'm not one of them, right? So if I'm going to be playing this champ, I'll be right down in the D tier. But there's a few people that can play it. If you're one of those, right? Absolutely. A tier, S tier, insane laning, very strong champ. But if you're not one of those, right, I don't recommend really picking up. It's not really worth the effort unless you're a very good player. Besides that, Neferi's got a little bit of a rework. And I've looked at the numbers. I've taken a look at also Curtis's breakdown on the Neferi. And Curtis is, of course, making an updated guide for Neferi on the MLA. He's the Neferi guy on the program. So I took a look at it. And to me, it looks like especially the first patch, this patch right here, I don't think Neferi is going to be OP. Numbers don't seem to favor her that much. I think the playstyle changes is also going to massively make it hard for people to adapt to it first. Yes, she has a bit more skill oppression. Yes, I think over time she has the potential to actually go up. But I think for now, safe to say, you don't want a Neferi in your team, and I don't think it's worth picking it up in rank just yet. So we're going to be finishing off with the flip the game tier. These are champs that have no lane agency and rely upon getting roams off on the game to actually get resources. And you have to understand that this is Talon mid, not Talon jungle, because I think Talon jungle is a different story where he can actually get resources by farming. But on mid lane, if you play against a decent laner, you're not going to be able to do that. Very similar to Katarina and Fizz. These champs, they just don't win games on mid. They just don't win games, as unfortunate as it is. These champs are just not good. You have to flip, you have to roam, you have to get resources somewhere else on the lane. And of course, you're gonna win some games with that. And of course, if you're very good at these champs, you may sometimes play against worse lane opponents and beat them. But if you're playing in the real ranks, you won't be able to get significant leads versus players that have a decent idea of how laning works. That's going to be the tier list for today, guys. I'm going to be making a new video next time with AJ in 2 weeks on the new patch. If you guys have any questions, recommendations, or anything else, let me know in the comments. I had a blast making this video. Of course, it's a serious video, but there are also a little bit of unserious notes and some joking. I wanted to make it a little bit more entertaining to watch besides it just being educational. Syndra is set S tier. She's a really good champion with her E. Now, I wanted to make it a little bit more fun. I wanted to add a little bit more flair into it. I hope you guys enjoyed. So thank you for watching. See you guys in 2 weeks again.